Many people have already asked, if God is all-powerful, why doesn't he simply destroy Satan and the fallen angels once and for all? It sounds obvious, doesn't it? After all, that would mean the immediate end of evil, pain, and destruction. But what if I told you that this idea is misleading? That there's a deep and surprising reason why God doesn't act like that? This answer might shock you because it breaks one of the most common beliefs, that absolute power means using force to solve any problem. But God doesn't act like human dictators, nor like impatient warriors. He chooses a path that seems slower, yet is infinitely more just and consistent with his character. The truth is that if he had eliminated Satan immediately, every created being could think the accuser was right, that God is a tyrant who doesn't accept questions and rules by imposition. What looks like a quick fix would actually fuel eternal doubt. That's why what's at stake isn't only the destruction of evil, but the revelation of divine justice. And it's precisely this mystery, why God allows evil to exist for a time, that we're going to uncover together. Get ready, because what you're about to discover isn't just a theological answer, but a key to understanding the patience, love, and even the purpose behind the suffering you face today. God is sovereign, no one doubts that. But the curious thing is that even having all power, he chooses to act within principles he himself established. It's like a king who, instead of forcing his will, decides to respect rules to show coherence with his character. This reminds us that his justice isn't whim, it's part of an unchanging essence that never contradicts itself. When we think of absolute power, we picture someone doing whatever they want without being accountable. But God acts in exactly the opposite way. He limits himself to show that he doesn't rule by imposition, but by love and justice. So when he lets time run its course before executing judgment, he's actually reaffirming his truth before all the eyes that watch him. This divine self-control teaches us something practical. Just because we can act doesn't mean we should. Think of a boss who could humiliate an employee but chooses to teach instead. Or a father who could yell at a child but decides to explain with patience. This kind of choice isn't weakness, it's mature strength. The same applies to how God deals with sin and evil. Many ask, why doesn't God just end Satan and the fallen angels? The answer begins here. If he did so immediately, he would be going against the freedom he granted his creatures. It's a paradox. Sovereignty that can do all things chooses not to use everything, precisely so that no one can accuse him of tyranny. When judgment comes, it will be incontestable because it will have been built on patience and revelation. This pattern opens a powerful reflection. If even the Creator chooses to limit himself to remain consistent with justice, how much more should we learn to exercise self-control in our daily decisions? His sovereignty teaches us that power without wisdom breeds destruction, but power used with justice generates trust and love. And the very freedom he grants to angels and humans will be the backdrop for the next step in our journey, angelic free will. When people talk about angels, many imagine beings programmed to obey like celestial robots. But the reality is different. They were created with free will, the same freedom we have. That means they could choose to love and obey God or reject that love. And this is where Lucifer, later called Satan, made his choice to rebel. Now think with me, if God had destroyed Satan the moment he rebelled, all the other angels could interpret that as an act of tyranny. Imagine a teacher who expels a student just because he asked a hard question. What would the other students think? They wouldn't see justice, only fear. And fear doesn't produce true loyalty, just forced obedience. Here's the big lesson. Freedom of choice is so valuable that God won't give it up, even in the face of evil. He prefers to deal with the consequences of rebellion rather than eliminate the possibility of genuine love. After all, love without freedom isn't love, it's mechanical submission. That's why he allowed Satan to continue existing, though with limits, so that the entire universe could witness the consequences of his choice. This detail also reframes our daily life. How many times do we have the chance to impose something on someone, a friend, a child, or even a coworker, and instead we're called to respect the right to choose? It can hurt to watch someone take a wrong path, but respecting that freedom is part of what it means to truly love. This is precisely the principle that sustains the spiritual conflict still unfolding. Notice how everything connects. Angelic free will wasn't just permission to choose, it was the stage for a cosmic conflict between justice and accusation. And that conflict, far from being only about angels, became a mirror for all created beings. And it's this very battle of ideas and loyalty that leads us to the next point, the nature of this cosmic showdown. The conflict between God and Satan was never a contest to see who's stronger, because that would be decided from the start. God is the Creator, all-powerful, there's no force capable of competing with him. What's truly at stake is much deeper. Truth versus lies, justice versus accusation, love versus pride. It's a war of ideas, loyalties, and trust. If it were just a power struggle, a snap of the fingers would end the fallen angels. But God doesn't impose his will by force. He wants every creature to understand for themselves the difference between his government of love and the deceptive kingdom Satan offers. That way the universe won't only see the result, it will be fully convinced that God's path is the only one that leads to life. Think of a courtroom. It isn't enough for the judge to say someone is guilty. The evidence must be presented so everyone accepts the verdict. In the same way, God is conducting this grand cosmic trial before every eye, celestial and human. Evil is given room to reveal itself, not because God approves it, but because he wants each one to see for themselves the consequences of rebellion. Practically, this touches our lives. Many conflicts aren't resolved with brute force but with patience and clarity. It's like a family argument. Raising your voice may silence someone, but it won't persuade the heart. Likewise, God doesn't want to merely silence Satan. He wants to prove before everyone that truth is stronger than any lie. And this dynamic opens the door to something even deeper. If Satan not only rebelled but also became the accuser of God, how does this role shape the course of the battle? That's what leads us to better understand his function as the accuser in this story. The very name Satan means accuser. That shows his role isn't merely to oppose, but to constantly cast doubt on God's character. He didn't stop at rebellion. His strategy was to sow distrust, insinuating that the divine government wasn't just. Picture a company where a resentful employee starts spreading rumors about the boss. Even without proof, this can shake everyone's confidence. If God had destroyed Satan at the moment of rebellion, it would look like he was trying to hide something. It would be like a politician silencing critical journalists. Instead of removing doubts, it reinforces the idea that something's wrong. God therefore allowed the accusations to run their course so the entire universe could see for itself whether there was truth or lies in what Satan said. This role of accuser appears several times in Scripture. In the book of Job, for example, Satan questions the man's faithfulness, insinuating he only obeys because he's blessed. That posture shows how the accuser works, always trying to stain God's image and devalue the faith of the righteous. It's not limited to the past. Even today many face those same voices of doubt and distrust. In real life this translates into something familiar, the internal accusations we all hear. You're not good enough. God doesn't care about you. If he were just, he wouldn't let you go through this. These voices echo the accusations Satan launched against the Creator, trying to pull us away from trust in his love. Recognizing the source of these lies is the first step in not being deceived. And precisely because God didn't answer accusation with immediate destruction, he chose another path, sending his Son, Jesus, not as a violent warrior, but as a living example of love and obedience. That detail opens the next chapter of this story, understanding Jesus not as someone who came wielding a sword, but as the perfect model of how to overcome evil. Many expected Jesus to come as a mighty warrior, sword in hand, ready to crush Satan and the fallen angels. But he chose a completely different path: obedience, love, and humility. His entire life was an answer to the accusations, showing that sin can be conquered without violence. It's as if he said, evil isn't defeated by force but by lived truth. When Satan tempted Jesus in the wilderness, he could have used his divine power to end it all. Instead, he answered with the word, revealing that trust in God is stronger than any temptation. That teaches us something simple and profound. We don't need to win our battles by imposition but by faithfulness. Like someone who faces unfair criticism and instead of stooping to the same level remains honest and steady. Jesus' death on the cross was the decisive blow against the accuser's lies. By giving himself without resistance, he disarmed evil at its very core, revealing that the true victory lies in sacrifice, not violence. It's counterintuitive, and that's what makes the message so powerful. God's power manifests in what the world considers weakness. This logic is totally opposite to that of the kingdom of darkness. Here's a practical point: each person is called to follow this same model. It doesn't mean passively accepting injustice, but living in such a way that truth proves stronger than any attack. That can be as simple as not returning offense with offense, or as big as holding principles in a hostile workplace. Jesus showed us it's possible to win without corruption. This example, so different from human expectations, not only silenced Satan's accusations, but perfectly revealed God's character. And that revelation opened space to understand divine justice. Not arbitrary but always based on evidence and transparency. That takes us to the next point, God's character and judgment. God never judges based on favoritism or spur-of-the-moment emotions. His justice is always grounded in evidence, revealed clearly so no one is left in doubt. This is unlike how we often decide, rushed, biased, or even self-interested. He wants not only a just result, but for everyone to understand the reason behind each decision. This changes everything. Imagine a court where the judge condemns someone without presenting proof. Even if he were right, no one would trust him. That's why God allows evil to fully manifest, so that, in the end, the judgment isn't just true, it's accepted by the whole universe. Then no one can claim they were wronged or never had a chance to choose. Practically, this teaches our own decisions should be guided by clarity, not haste. How many times do we act rashly and then have to backtrack? God shows that even the most serious judgment, the destruction of evil, is carried out with patience, revelation, and transparency. This posture is an example for any human leadership, family, company, or friendship. Another important point, God's justice isn't limited to punishment, it's pedagogical, it teaches. When He allows sin to run its course to a point, He's showing everyone the true face of rebellion. It's like a teacher who lets students see the result of an error before correcting it. The lesson then becomes much deeper and unforgettable. And precisely because His justice is founded on revelation and evidence, it becomes clear that God isn't in a hurry to close the conflict. He prefers to wait for the right moment, the prophetic time, when everyone will be convinced of His righteousness. This patience opens the way to understanding God's timing in the face of evil. God isn't in a rush to destroy evil, and that might seem strange at first. After all, who wouldn't want Satan and the fallen angels eliminated immediately? But His patience isn't negligence, it's part of His love and justice. As Scripture says, He does not want anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. This delay is actually a wider opportunity for all. The time He grants has a teaching purpose. It's like when a teacher gives a student more time, not because the deadline was forgotten but because the teacher wants real learning. So too with God. He withholds final judgment so every created being can clearly see the way of life and the path of destruction. This divine patience also teaches us something practical. Knowing how to wait can be the key to victory. How often do we make hasty decisions and reap bad consequences? God shows that waiting for the right time is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. In relationships, business, or personal projects, patience opens doors that haste slams shut. Another point, Satan's time isn't infinite. There's a limit defined by God, set within a prophetic calendar. That means no matter how much evil seems to prosper, its days are already numbered. It's like a chess match where one player is already checkmated, but the moves must play out so everyone can clearly see the defeat. And in this context comes a lesson for every Christian. If God is patient even with evil, how much more should we be patient with one another? This posture isn't passivity, it's strength under control. And that same self-mastery opens the way to understanding the importance of the moral example each of us is called to set amid the conflict. The gospel shows us that overcoming evil isn't about physical force but character. Jesus is the greatest example. He conquered through faithfulness, obedience, and love, not weapons or violence. That reveals how moral example is more powerful than any display of power. An upright life speaks louder than 1,000 speeches. Every Christian is called to reflect this same pattern. Picture a workplace. When gossip runs rampant, the one who remains honest and patient is already preaching, even in silence. That kind of attitude is contagious because it presents an alternative in the darkness. The world learns more from what it sees than from what it hears. Following this model takes courage. It isn't easy to hold to principles when everyone around seems to go the other way. But that's exactly what makes the example so transformative. A person who chooses to forgive, even when they have every reason to hate, demonstrates in practice how salvation is real and how love can break evil's cycle. It's interesting that Satan tries to imitate this principle, but always in a twisted way. He too uses examples, but to inspire destruction, pride, and rebellion. That's why living by the truth isn't just a personal choice. It's also resistance against the enemy's strategies. Our example reveals which side we stand on in the spiritual conflict. And this call to be an example isn't limited to big actions. It starts in small choices: honesty on a test, keeping your word, treating someone with respect even in anger. Each act is a seed showing which kingdom we represent. And this awareness leads us to see that the real war isn't physical, but spiritual. When we think of war, we picture armies, weapons, and bloody battles. But Scripture reminds us, our struggle isn't against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. That means the real battle takes place in an invisible dimension, affecting thoughts, emotions, and choices. It isn't a fight of muscles but of mind and heart. That's why the enemy doesn't show up with flaming swords but with well-crafted lies, subtle doubts, and temptations disguised as legitimate desire. He works in the shadows trying to distort truth. And the armor God offers isn't a physical sword but the shield of faith, the breastplate of righteousness, and the sword of the Spirit, His Word. These images show the war is spiritual and demands spiritual preparation. Practically, this is clear in everyday situations. When someone struggles with anxiety, envy, or addiction, changing the external environment alone doesn't work. The root is in a spiritual conflict. It's like a computer. You can swap the screen, but if a virus is in the system, nothing really changes. The battle must be won inside before it shows outside. This understanding changes how we respond to evil. Instead of seeing people as enemies, we recognize many times they're just instruments of something bigger. That keeps us from wasting energy on hate and reminds us our fight is against enslaving ideas, not individuals. This perspective brings peace even amid conflict. And precisely because the war is spiritual, victory won't come from human strategies but from a divine plan of redemption already underway. This process isn't instant. It's carefully built to reveal God's justice before the entire universe. That leads us to the next point, redemption as a process. Many imagine redemption as a single, instant act, but in truth it's a carefully guided process. From the fall in Eden to the cross of Jesus, and from the cross to the final judgment, each phase plays a role in revealing the divine character. It's like a great story that must be told in chapters so no one misses the plot's details. This process involves time, choices, and revelation. It's not just about forgiving sins, it's about educating the whole universe on the seriousness of evil and the beauty of obedience. Just as a doctor doesn't merely soothe symptoms but treats the underlying disease, God works to eradicate sin once and for all. Each step of redemption reveals more clearly the difference between love and destruction. Practically, that teaches us deep transformations don't happen overnight. Think of someone changing harmful habits. True change isn't a single decision, but the consistency of small daily choices. Likewise, God is working in us and in history patiently, building a complete and lasting victory. Another point, redemption is transparent. God isn't hiding anything. On the contrary, He's allowing everyone to follow the process. Every revelation, every fulfilled prophecy, every act of Jesus is a piece of this great puzzle. This ensures that in the end, when evil is defeated, no one will doubt God's justice. And this process points to an inevitable climax, the moment when the whole universe will witness the final judgment. The destruction of Satan and the fallen angels won't be an impulsive act, but the conclusion of a long path of patience and revelation. That's our next point, the perspective of the final judgment. The final judgment is one of Scripture's most solemn themes, and there we find the definitive answer to the question, why hasn't God destroyed Satan and the fallen angels yet? The answer is timing, the moment determined by the Creator. Satan will indeed be destroyed, but it will happen before the entire universe, after the final judgment described in Revelation. This detail is essential. If destruction were immediate, it would look arbitrary. But when carried out on the basis of undeniable evidence and testimony, no one will be able to question divine justice. It's like a public court. When the sentence is based on clear evidence, the result is accepted, even by those who don't like the judge. Furthermore, the final judgment shows sin isn't handled superficially. It won't be swept under the rug or forgotten. It will be eliminated definitively. That brings security to the whole universe, since rebellion will never again have a place. Judgment isn't only about punishment, it's about restoring order and trust in God's government. In our daily life, this perspective reminds us we too must wait for the right time for justice. We don't always see the immediate harvest of good or the immediate fall of evil. But just as the final judgment is certain, so too is the truth that every action has a consequence. That certainty helps us live by faith, even when circumstances seem unfair. And precisely because God chose to reveal His justice step by step, we learn a crucial truth. Truth can't be imposed. It must be seen, understood, and freely embraced. That's our next step. Truth must be seen, not forced. God doesn't force anyone to believe in Him. He could impose His truth with irresistible power, but that wouldn't produce love, only submission. The beauty of the divine plan is that He lets truth be seen clearly so that each person can choose freely. It's like sunlight. You can't force anyone to see it, but when day breaks, no one can deny it. This principle dismantles Satan's main accusation, that God is a tyrant. If he forced everyone to submit, he would, in fact, be reinforcing that lie. Instead, God lets reality speak for itself. He allows sin to reveal its own consequences, and the pain caused by evil becomes evidence against the accuser. Practically, we see this in many situations. Think of a father teaching responsibility. He can simply prohibit, but sometimes he lets a child experience the consequences of their choices. Though painful, that lesson becomes far more effective. Likewise, God allows us to see sin's consequences so we learn in an irrefutable way. This method shows love is not based on coercion but on conviction. Loving God truly is only possible when we understand who He is and why He's worthy of trust. That's why Jesus' life was so striking. In every gesture of love, in every word of truth, He revealed the Father, without imposing anything by force. And in that same principle we understand that the cosmic battle also repeats itself within the human heart. Every day, we're invited to choose between the path of revealed truth or caving to rebellion and ego. That's the next step, perceiving how this story repeats in us. The conflict between God and Satan isn't just a distant drama fought in the heavenly realms. On a smaller scale, it repeats inside each human heart. The same fight between pride and humility, obedience and rebellion happens daily in our decisions. Each choice, however small, shows which side we're on in this great spiritual conflict. Consider simple situations, when someone is tempted to lie to escape a problem or to act selfishly instead of helping. They seem small moments, but they reveal the same spirit of rebellion Satan chose long ago. On the other hand, choosing obedience, patience and love is to live as Christ lived, reflecting God's character and practical attitudes. This reality shows the spiritual battle isn't just out there, but within us. The battlefield is the heart. And just as in the cosmic conflict, God doesn't force anyone to follow Him. He presents truth and each person decides whether to trust His justice or follow their own way. Freedom of choice is again at the center. In everyday life this is very clear. In how we handle offense, how we treat others in traffic, or how we react to frustration. It's in those moments that the story repeats. And that's why we must stay alert. It isn't merely about habits or behaviors. It mirrors the government we choose to represent. And precisely because this struggle is internal, God allows Satan, even as an enemy, to still play a role. The role of tempter and opposer, testing our faithfulness and revealing what's in our hearts. That brings us to the next theme, Satan as a tool by permission. Though he is God's declared enemy, and ours, Satan plays a temporarily permitted role in the divine plan. He acts as a tester and tempter, proving the faithfulness of those who say they love God. It's not that God needs him, but his existence ends up serving as a contrast to reveal the difference between obedience and rebellion. This principle can feel uncomfortable, but it makes sense in real life. An athlete only discovers true strength when facing resistance. In the same way, faith matures when tested. Satan's temptations expose our weaknesses, but they also open space for faithfulness to be displayed in a real way. In Scripture, we see this clearly in Job's story. God allowed Satan to test him, not to destroy him but to reveal the integrity of his heart. That episode shows that even when evil seems to act freely, God has set limits. Satan can only go as far as the Creator allows, and this turns every trial into an opportunity for spiritual growth. This understanding changes how we view daily struggles. Instead of thinking only in terms of defeats, we can see each temptation as a test revealing which side we choose. It's as if life places us before constant exams, and our responses become public declarations of faithfulness. The enemy, without intending to, becomes a teaching instrument. And precisely because the tests aren't just individual but are also observed, we reach a bigger dimension. It isn't only us who see this conflict. Angels and heavenly beings follow each scene of this cosmic drama. That takes us to the next point, the participation of heavenly beings in the conflict. The Apostle Paul writes that, "We have been made a spectacle to the world, to angels as well as to men." 1 Corinthians 4 verse 9. This means the conflict between God and Satan is observed not only by us on earth but by the entire universe. Angels and other created beings are watching, following every detail of this spiritual battle to understand God's justice in contrast to rebellion. It's like a courtroom where the case involves not only the judge and the accused, but a vast audience that must understand each argument. The whole universe witnesses Satan's accusations and God's response. That's why evil will be destroyed only when no doubt remains that God's character is just and true. Then trust in His government will be restored forever. This shows our choices also have a cosmic dimension. Each act of obedience or rebellion becomes testimony before heavenly beings. It's as if every decision we make appears on a stage before invisible spectators who see how we handle faith, patience, love, and obedience. Practically, this can change how we live. When someone resists the temptation to lie, cheat, or act unjustly, it's not merely a private moment. It shows the universe that there are still hearts willing to trust God, even in difficulty. Each attitude becomes a piece in the puzzle that proves the truth of the divine plan. And when all heavenly beings fully understand the contrast between light and darkness, between love and pride, the final moment will arrive. Only then will Satan and his fallen angels be destroyed, and evil will never again have a place. That's the story's end, and now that we've covered all the topics, we can move on to the conclusion. After understanding why God doesn't destroy Satan and the fallen angels immediately, an inevitable question arises. And you, which side have you chosen in this conflict? Because in the end, this battle isn't only cosmic. It repeats inside your heart every single day. Have you allowed love, patience, and obedience to guide your choices? Or have you yielded to the same strategies of accusation and pride the enemy has used from the beginning? This reflection isn't theoretical, it's practical. It's in how you deal with sin, with temptation, and even with the people around you. And if today were the day when all truth was revealed before the universe, how would your choices testify about your faith? Would you be ready for your example to confirm that you trust God, even when you don't understand everything? That's the challenge I leave you with. So I invite you not only to absorb this knowledge but to apply it. Be light in the midst of darkness. Live as a witness that good is greater than evil. And if this message spoke to you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep diving into truths that transform. We still have much to learn together.